Oof. Capcom gotta be the kings of like the 8-bit, 16-bit era, right? We covered the great Capcom games on the NES, we covered the great Capcom games on the Super Nintendo recently, but Capcom also made 13 games for the Sega Genesis. Well, they published 13 games all the same. How are you feeling? You got John Riggs here ranking the games from Capcom for your Sega Genesis. And I'm just sticking with the US list on this one. That's why I said Genesis and not Mega Drive, but whatever. Watching is supporting the channel, I appreciate you, but I also sell my video games and the air fresheners I make on my shop. You can check out a link in the description below. And Bedkey as well. Well, it's the printer paper I use when I ship my items, and I know they're going to be stuck on there, I know they're going to work great, and they print wonderfully every single time. So if you need yours, check out a link in the description below and save some cash when you use my code. Forgotten Worlds. Now this was prime Capcom arcade. Capcom, best known for a lot of their arcade games coming to home consoles. NES started that way. All the great Capcom games that came out when the NES was released originally were just arcade ports to kind of, make Capcom their thing before Capcom started doing their own stuff like Mega Man, like the Disney games. And then same with Capcom at the arcade going to the 16-bit generation with games like Forgotten Worlds. I really do like this game. I don't like the pivot. Now, in the arcade, you have that kind of spin dial controller, so you can shoot like, you can spin it around in front of you, behind you. In this game, you don't have that pivot controller. You have to like push the A button to rotate clockwise, and then the C button to rotate... Oh, no, hold on. It's the other way around. It's A button to rotate counterclockwise, and then the C button to rotate clockwise, which gets kind of confusing. I wish it had the option to just shoot in the direction you're facing, or just always shoot in front of you. Or maybe like have one button shoot in front of you, the other button shoot behind you, just like it does with sidearms. It does kind of get better the more you get used to it, but it's still... it's still kind of rough to deal with. It would be so much of a better game if the firing mechanic without having to spin around was a lot better. Fun as a 2-player, pretty rough to play. As much as I love this game, I'm giving it a D based on controls alone. It is a fun game though, don't get me wrong, I do like this game, just not on the Genesis. Along those same lines, you also have Ghouls and Ghosts. We have a sequel to Ghosts and Goblins. They could have just called it Ghosts and Goblins too. And they called this one Ghouls and Ghosts. Starting to make me think like what the third one might be called. Like we have Ghosts and Goblins, Ghouls and Ghosts. Maybe the other ones could have been Vampires and Ghouls. I have no idea. Just the perfect amount for a sequel to give it that upgrade. Great graphics, great music. Love the soundtrack. Love that opening song. I love that that first stage music to Ghosts and Goblins. It was that perfect kind of macabre haunted mansion waltz. Was it a waltz? Da, 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 da. No, it's not a waltz. Never mind. Okay, so. To think about it for a second. I loved the fact that you could pick up the golden armor, which would also give you that upgrade item ability that you can charge up your weapon. Whatever the weapon happened to be, you can charge up and use it as something new too. And this one you can shoot up. You can't double jump yet. Double jump didn't come till later, but you can also you can shoot your weapon upward, which was super great. Again, another great game. Give it an A. Love this game. Cheeky Cheeky Boys, you would think would be the name of the import, but no, the US version is called Cheeky Cheeky Boys. It's called Mega Twins in Japan. Cheeky Cheeky Boys. Mega Twins. Hey, I got it right. Thank you, not doing research. 2-player if you'd like, or you can choose 1 player or the other. You can choose which stage you're going to go to. And I liked this game quite a bit. I liked this game because it's from Capcom. You slash your sword, you pick up your money, you can use your money to buy upgrades and items and stuff like that. I was such a huge fan of Willow in the arcade. Willow for the NES was fine. Willow in the arcade, though, that was the one. That was the one I wanted. We never got a home console version. However, this game plays kind of like that. Enough for me to say, you know what, this will do for now. It was a game, admittedly, I didn't grow up with. I didn't play this back in the day. I didn't rent it back in the day. None of my friends had it back in the day. So I didn't play this game till later in life, but even playing it later in life, man, it's such a good game. I do like this game quite a bit, man. Like the look, like the color, like the style. It is that Genesis game that, man, this could have been on the Super Nintendo. And if it did, it would have sold very well. But I love it when sometimes during the console wars especially, when sometimes there would be a game on a certain console that all of my Nintendo Pro friends were just like, oh man, I want to play that game, but I don't have a Genesis, and I'm not getting a Genesis just for that game. I was like, well, that sucks to be you, because that's why you gotta have both, if you can. Don't be playing favorites. Neither one of those companies care about you or your loyalty. Just play whatever's fun. And Cheeky Cheeky Boys, yeah, Mega Twin, whatever you want to call it, Cheeky Cheeky Boys, I'm talking about the US version here, is a very, very fun game. Giving this one also an A. It's a great game. Hey, how about Merks? Merks was touted as the sequel to Commando, and in Japan, the title is the second Commando game, so there you go. Overworld, shooting the guys, it's that style of game that I really do like. They kind of get monotonous after a while, But this one's great because it has the arcade version and then it has like an original version. So there's like, you know, yeah, I played in the arcade, I'm gonna play that one. Or there's like kind of a, not really a remixed version, but just like it's a slightly different version. That plays the same, it's just like another, you know, it'd be like if they, I don't know. You know what I mean? There's two different versions of the game. You can play the arcade one, and the arcade one's on here too, and then they also have the Genesis version of the game on here, which is that one too. But they also included the arcade version as well. But it's the same game. It's like, how about this? It plays the same. That makes sense to you? It would be like if the game, I'm over-explaining it now at this point. If the game had all the levels, let's just say for the sake of nothingness, 20 levels in this game, and then they said, okay, 10 levels are the arcade version, these 10 other levels are going to be the original version. I'm talking about it too much. It's a B. It is a fun, great game. It does get a little monotonous, but it's worth a playthrough. The perfect rental back in the day. Never mind that, let me talk about Saturday Night Slam Masters. I've talked about this before on the Super Nintendo the Super Nintendo Capcom games, and I feel the same way with the Genesis version too. I think they both play great. They're fine. They're just not wrestling games. There's Capcom fighting games cosplaying as a wrestling game. Yeah, you can do some wrestling moves, but not as much as you would like. I mean, I wish it was more of a wrestling game that had maybe some fighting moves. That'd be fine. And the fact that you can play as Hagar is wonderful. And it's still a great game. It's good. I just wish it was better. I don't even remember what I gave it on my Super Nintendo video. I'll say B off the top of my head, because again, it's a great game, but I was a letdown. Because I was hoping for a wrestling game, and instead I got a fighting game that happened to have some wrestling moves in it. But when you talk about fighting games and you talk about Capcom, you gotta talk about Street Fighter 2, and Genesis finally, after what, a year and a half, 2 years later or something, Street Fighter 2 Special Championship Edition finally came out for the Sega Genesis. Yeah, we jumped, they didn't even release Street Fighter 2 with like only the 8 playable characters. They jumped straight to the one where you can play as the 4 bosses. This game plays extremely well for the Sega Genesis. In fact, there are some people who preferred this Genesis version over the Super Nintendo version. Now to me, I played it a bit in the arcade, but all of my Street Fighter 2 experience really comes from that Super Nintendo version. You know what I mean? Like, to me, the Super Nintendo version of Street Fighter 2 is the definitive version of Street Fighter 2, because I played it so much versus playing it in the arcade and all that. The suck thing, and if you had a Sega Genesis and you play this game, you already know what I'm going to say, is you only have the 3 buttons. And the start button changes the moves from punch to kick. So you, along with doing your moves, you have to kind of switch back and forth. They do have a 6-button controller, but if you only had the 3-button controller, that's what you're dealing with. And if you have a 6-button controller, it's an S. If you have a 3-button controller, it's an A, because it's one more thing to think about. But I'm still giving it an S, and I would do the same for Super Street Fighter 2 as well. Super Street Fighter 2 did release in America on your Sega Genesis. Again, it plays very well. It included a few new characters. Cammy made the list finally. I liked DJ. DJ was fun. I'll play a little bit with Cammy here. Not doing very well. But yeah, fun to see. I'm glad they had this. So for the people who didn't have a Super Nintendo or refused, good to know that they had the option for this one too. And same thing as before, with the start button switching between punches and kicks. Hopefully you had a 6-button controller by now. But S tier if you have a 6-button controller, A tier if you have a 3-button controller. And I was going to say I don't make the rules. I literally just made the rules. That remind me. Hey, did you ever play Strider? Holy moly, did Strider blow my mind when I first saw it in the arcade. I was at an arcade in Santa Cruz, California on a family vacation. I was like, Strider, what's this? This is cool. You can't even see the sword. You can just see the swing when he swishes the sword. And it just looked cool. It sounded cool. It just had that cool look to it. It just had that it factor for me and Capcom in the arcade in the late 80s. And then when it came out on the Sega Genesis, I was like, I can't find a flaw at the time. I was just like, this is exactly the game I played in the arcade. Like 1-to-1. Now, if I play them back and forth, I could probably tell you a little bit of a difference, but yeah, at the time I was like, oh my goodness, this is insane. And I was so happy for that. I'm a huge fan of Strider. Going back to it now, if it's been a moment, if it's been a minute, if it's been since the late 80s, early 90s, since you've last played the first Strider game, the hit detection is weird, the jumping is off. There's a lot more issues with it than I had now. I was better back then, before I was now, but still fun to play. You know, I'll give it. Nostalgia tells me to give it an A. I will give it a B because again, it always comes down to play control. You can have the great game with the great music and the great sound and the great graphics, but man, if the controls don't do exactly what you want it to do, you're not going to have a fun experience. And you do have a fun experience with this game, just it could have been better. Controls could have been tighter. Oh boy. So, Strider Returns came out. I'm here to say up front, not as bad of a game as most people don't give it credit for, if that makes sense. They did the best they could. I think it's decent. It's just hard to match what Strider did, and what they tried to do was did what Strider did instead of kind of doing their own thing. And they didn't have to do all that. It's like there's almost like too many item pickup things. You know, enemies might take too much damage, or maybe you're just me and you just go through and never mind the damage. And sometimes like the damage shows up late, like oh, I didn't have time to react, and it's too late for you. I mean, it's okay. It's just not as bad as people say it is. It's a C, right down the middle for me. Oh, and you can also shoot your throwing stars. You have like 3 buttons now. So you have like your jump, your slash, your sword, and you also you can shoot your little shurikens or something like that too. That's kind of a neat added bonus. It is my own fault that I keep forgetting that the Great Circus Mystery starring Mickey Mouse also came out for the Sega Genesis. I keep forgetting this. Totally forgot about it. It came out in 1994, so we were looking at like 5 years after the Genesis was launched. Which is funny when you think about, oh man, all the way in 1994. Well, the Nintendo Switch has been out for like 7 years now. So like new Switch games are like, on the Switch? Really? It's like, well no, it's still going strong. 7, 8 years now, something like that. And it plays great. It plays just like the Super Nintendo version. It's just fun. It's a fun Disney Capcom adventure, and great to see it on the Sega Genesis. I'm sorry it came out so late. I would have liked this game to come out like maybe right after Castle of Illusion. Would have been a nice time to bring this game out. But instead we also got like Fantasia, which was terrible. Castle of Illusion was good. I like that one quite a bit. And it would have been nice to get this one a little bit sooner, just because of how kind of... polished isn't the right word, because it's not exactly polished, but it's still just a lot of fun. Can be a kid's game. Kids might like this game, even fun for adults. I say adults, let's see, 1994. I was in high school at that time. But it's fun. It's another A. It's another A for me. The Punisher. Hey, so it's funny because Capcom had the agreement with Marvel and Disney before Disney had the agreement with Disney and Marvel and Star Wars and all that. But never mind about all that. We had the Punisher. Punisher was cool. You can be a 2-player if you'd like. You can also have Nick Fury in here too. And it's a beat 'em up, but not a great one. I mean, beat 'em ups are either fantastic or they're just like, it's fine. You know, like Streets of Rage 2, fantastic. And then games like Batman Returns, it's fine, you know. And this was like, yeah, it's fine. It's fine. I mean, I would have liked more from a Punisher game. I mean, he certainly does punish people, I suppose, so I can't knock that, I guess. But it is an average beat 'em up. It's a C. You can disagree. I don't mind. Let me know in the comments. And make sure you check out the games that Capcom released on the Super Nintendo. Some amazing games came out on the Super Nintendo from Capcom. I almost said Konami. Konami's coming soon.